Greetings and thank you for joining me on the Victory Independence channel. I want to talk about ZIRP. This is the zero interest rate policy, basically a permanent zero interest rate policy by the Federal Reserve. And we saw what happened when interest rates were too low for too long in the housing market. As soon as interest rates started to creep up, you saw that housing bubble collapse. And if you look at right now what's going on, you can look at Japan where they've had zero interest rates forever. They try to bring them up a little bit and it just wrecks the economy. And if you look at the housing market today, I know so many people who tell me, oh, the housing has bottomed. And yes, in certain select cities, select areas where they have booming economies, more than likely tied to natural resources, specifically oil, yeah, those houses may have bottomed because people may be able to afford higher payments. But if you look at these desert regions, these outskirts of major counties where the building was crazy, those areas have absolutely not bottomed. So people think they bottomed because houses are selling for $75,000, $60,000. Like, oh, that's finally bottom. You can't go any lower. But you got to remember, it's based off of people with a 4.5% interest rate for 30 years coming in there to buy those homes, plus the loans being funded by the government. But, again, just to focus on the interest rate, what would happen if interest rates went to 7% or 8% or 10%? So you're in a situation where if the interest rates rose, it doesn't matter that there's copper and lumber and permits and labor and time and all these commodities put into this house. It doesn't matter. Ask the people in Detroit if that matters. There's houses over there selling for 5-6 grand. You're telling me the physical commodities in those houses, the cost of permits, the cost to construct a home, heck yeah, it's a lot more than 5 grand. But it doesn't matter because of the supply and demand. And a lot of the supply and demand has to do with the interest rate. In fact, the majority of it does for housing because we have a housing that has been built by the government to make the payments affordable to you, not housing affordable. Not where we have home ownership. We just have a bunch of people who are renting from the bank. Most people, have the 30-year loan. They live there for 5 years and they move to another home for 30 years. I mean, I know it's a countless number of baby boomers that I know in their 60s. They've all got, 25 years left, maybe 30 years left. Maybe they bought their home a few years ago or refinanced it, or upgraded or whatever they did. I mean, it's just, they're never going to own their home, never going to own it. And I know people say, well, you never own it technically because of the taxes. Well, of course, we live in an environment where, of statism. So you're never going to technically truly own your dirt. But let's be real. If you own your home free and clear and all you're paying is your property taxes every year, it's about as close to owning your home. Maybe okay, you own the physical structure, but you still got to pay taxes on the property. Of course, I disagree with that, but it is what it is. And I'd certainly rather just pay property taxes every year than pay a mortgage payment and property taxes. Now, what's going to happen when the Federal Reserve tries to raise interest rates? That's the problem. That's the pickle the Fed's in. It's not going to happen. You do have natural deflationary forces. As I've talked about many times, I like the deflationist argument all the way up until the point of the result, because here's where I disagree with them. I disagree with them about the currency itself. People try to use the Great Depression as an example. That's ridiculous. The Great Depression had a currency that was much different than the currency we have today. Yes, they devalued the dollar greatly. They took it from the gold backing from 21 to right around 35. So there's a huge devaluation of the U.S. dollar. I mean, a lot of civil rights, personal rights, property rights were taken away during those times. And I expect the same thing in this next decade. And they're going to devalue the dollar. But this time it's going to be even easier. So just as I was talking about with James Rickards last week in my Vision Victory interview, it's the currency itself that you really have to focus on. So yes, you've got deflationary forces, you have inflationary forces like the printing of money and like, let's say if there was an oil spike. But where you really have to focus is the loss of faith in the currency itself. And that's the problem we face. So I'll be honest with you, that I totally see everything the deflationists see as far as the demand destruction in the economy, especially if oil was to spike at $200 because of a war with Iran or something. But I think what you're seeing already is a loss of faith in the currency. When that happens, it's going to happen like an avalanche. So let's look at Iran right now. Iran and India, this is huge. It's unconfirmed, but when asked about it, India is not denying it. And the story's been out there for 3 days now. But apparently, Iran and India may have done a trade in oil for gold. They've been talking about this for several months now. But there's a story out there that may have already happened, an exchange where Iran sold oil and India paid them in gold. This is huge. Obviously, gold is real money. The central banks have been loading up on gold. Sovereign nations have been loading up on gold recently. And, Bernanke's asking Congress by Ron Paul, is gold money? No. Why do they buy it? Tradition. If you go to Gada.com today and look at their, or Data.org and look at one of their dispatches, one of the dispatches, Paul Volcker admitted that they were manipulating gold in the early 70s. So I have no doubt that they're doing it now, but there's a reason gold is the fallback currency. It's the safe haven. It is the currency king. It is real money. It is something that is not destructible. It has an inherent value. It takes these people a lot of time to mine this stuff out. So the loss of faith of the currency. Obviously, Iran is initiating something, and this may put them in a war. I mean, if you think about Saddam Hussein rejection of the dollar prior to the Iraq War, if you look at Gaddafi trying to round up African nations to have a gold-backed currency to trade with oil, Gaddafi's gone. As I talked about in the Rickards interview last week, I asked, Rickards brought up a great point. He's like, "Where's that gold?" I think he said there was 100 metric tons. Where's that gold? And then you've got Japan and China having a new trade agreement where they're going to use each other's currencies instead of the U.S. dollar. Same thing with China and Russia. Same thing with China and Brazil. Same thing with Iran and China, Iran and India, Iran and Japan, Iran and Russia. So you've got a huge bulk of these power players, these countries that are rejecting the current rule of the dollar. And as that happens, screw inflation and screw deflation. If nobody wants the damn currency and nobody respects it, it's worthless. It doesn't matter if he prints a bunch of money or if unemployment's at 50% in the US and we have a massive demand destruction. If nobody wants the paper, it's over. Because remember, the paper is just the perception. And of course, perception is most people's reality. So if the perception is that the dollar is worth something, it's a medium of exchange, then it's worth something. But if there's a loss of faith, if nobody wants to use it, if people are rejecting it, if people are using other things as a currency, as a medium of exchange to trade things, it's over for the US dollar. And, I think that's where we're headed. Looking at it way out, yeah, this could take years and years to play out. But at the same point in time, with everything that's going on with the Federal Reserve, with everything that's going on with the US government, it's very likely, in my opinion, that this whole thing plays out within the next 3 or 4 years. I don't want to say 3 or 4 years and people think, oh, 3 or 4 years, okay, that's kind of the time frame. No, it could happen tomorrow. I mean, it would not take much to have a complete panic in the U.S. dollar markets, especially what's going on with Europe. So it's not a big leap of what we're talking about. I remember when we were doing videos in 2008, and people would say, we're crazy. And of course, the deflation argument is always there, and I respect that deflationary argument because those are very smart people. I just think that they're, for some reason, completely ignoring the currency itself. Because, think of a red light. And I've used this analogy before. We all stop at red lights when we're in our cars. And it's not because we were born and we knew inherently that, I've got to stop at a red light. It's because that's the rules that have been set up. So everybody has said, okay, we're all going to have rule of law. And we're going to all agree that we're going to stop at red lights. But what would happen if just 1% of the population stopping at red lights and started going through them? It would create uncertainty around red lights. And all of a sudden, everybody might start ignoring green lights too. You might stop for both red and green lights because you don't know about those people that you've been hearing about who keep flying through red lights and getting in accidents. So it's not going to, my point is, it's not going to take a lot for the dollar, the perception of a strong dollar, the perception that it is worth something, to just completely evaporate. when one country, and it doesn't have to be China, it could be Singapore, it could be a city state. Once one country just completely says enough, I'm done with it, it's over. I don't want anything to do with it. We're not accepting dollars. We'll accept yen, we'll accept renminbi, we'll accept gold. We don't want U.S. dollars. Once that happens, it's over. And I think we're nearing that point. So anyway, sorry if I went long. You guys have a great week. Hope to talk to you this weekend. I'll have a cool interview tomorrow on the Vision Victory channel. Talk to you later. Bye.